Ready? Time being 7:03, I'd like to call a regular scheduled council meeting of Monday, February 14th, 2022 to order. Y'all please stand and take the flag. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Councilmember Larry Johnson and Dale Andrews will not be here this evening. They are both ill. So we'll have a little short for group tonight. Also, I'm going to go ahead and move staff mayor's report in front of public input. Read a letter to Mark Tate, Chairman, the Planning and Zoning Committee, Copper Canyon, Texas. Mark, due to the heavy travel schedule of my current position, I am resigning as a member of the Copper Canyon Planning and Zoning Committee effective immediately. And I would like to thank the current council for the opportunity to serve. Jackie Lieber. With that, Donna, of course, we're going to need to have an agenda item at the next meeting to accept a resignation. I think first alternate is Jeff Dahl. So we'd elevate Jeff Dahl to permanent. We need an agenda item for that. Also, Greg Porter would be first alternate, from second alternate, first alternate. And it would be my suggestion to council to postpone any other appointments until the normal cycle in September, October, because we still have an alternate in place. So bring that forward at the next meeting, I appreciate it. Next item is public input, and if there's any other council or mail staff report, I'll go back to that. Next item is public input. Anyone would like to speak under public input may do so for a period of 3 minutes on an agenda or non-agenda item. First person to speak is Nancy Henry.
Hello, I'm Nancy Henry at 7611 Trinidad Lane. I wanted to, and this is to be included in the minutes, and I'll email the copy this year because it makes it easier for her. This is about the drainage and flooding survey due February the 28th. I'd like to thank Jeff Mayer for recommending at the November 8th council meeting the residents submit their flooding stories and pictures. Our county engineer, Chris Hartley. It is hard to imagine how badly one's property floods without the pictures, and I understood you couldn't post the pictures on the survey itself?
The majority of people brought them in to me or Chris Hart.
Okay, well, I'll email them to both of you, because I have some great pictures of the flooding, including my huge koi being pushed out through to the bar ditch from my guitar. So I think that'll help, and I can give a lot of stories for all of that. Thank you. Have a great evening. Happy Valentine's.
Anyone else in public input? Hearing none, I'll go to the next item, go back to staff and mayor's council report. I'm
I have
sorry.
a letter to be read into the
Okay, go
record.
ahead.
From Lisa Humphrey. Hi, Don and Sheila. I would like to express my gratitude for all involved in the cleanup and repair of the drainage creek between the Burns property and the Humphrey property. The Tin Chapel Creek ultimately appears to be much better in the removal of some trees, potentially blocking water flow, in the addition and repositioning of some of the boulders. Time will tell whether more maintenance may be necessary in a few years once we see how the rains impact the repair project. But for now, it seems to be much improved. The crews were very respectful and took great care to clean up after completion. Thanks to you and Dale and Chris for leading the project, and a special thank you to Jeff Mayer, who pursued this project as a member of the previous council and also pushed this effort through under his current term as a member of the town council. It really does take teamwork to complete a successful project. Please read this letter at the next council meeting. Warm regards, Jay and Lisa Humphrey.
Thank you. Next item is staff report. I'm sorry. We'll sure go back to council report. I'm sorry. Let's see what's going on.
All right, Mayor, just a couple of, the first item is, I know it was brought up at the last council meeting about the overtime and our sheriffs. We continue to pursue that. I have been advised that Sheriff Murphy and Captain Pena are continuing to work on this. As was mentioned before, the biggest issue that they face is their current staff. It makes it apparently difficult for them to cut people loose to be available to do our overtime and still be able to do their normal duty. And I think that that's where they are running into some issues. The holdup is not on our end, because obviously the funds were allocated for that. But we do have to be considerate of their requirements and what the county needs as far as they're concerned. So we're still waiting on that. Once we have more information on that, I'll be giving everybody a generic update, but I will stay away from specifics for obvious reasons on when patrols are going to be increased or what locations, et cetera. But we are continuing to look at it, and everybody involved and our deputies are aware of our need for increased vigilance and just kind of a more focused effort of law enforcement around our county. So they're working on that.
But they're making some, they may be doing some shift changes on it.
They are doing some shift changes because apparently, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't even know what the actual shifts are myself. And I never ask, because frankly, it doesn't matter. Administration takes care of that. And I'm sure they do a great job with the hours that the deputies were assigned. But apparently some folks have taken to finding out exactly what the hours are, where they patrol, et cetera. And they have been able to make some inroads into figuring out those schedules. And so that's being modified in order to continue a better enforcement practice.
Second.
Can I make one comment, please? So since I started this project in the previous council and beforehand, on the request from several of our citizens, one of the concepts that is important to remember is this was never, I didn't discuss this as a overtime issue, but as a off-duty issue. So in your next discussion with this Captain Pena or the sheriff, if you could ask them if there's any officers that currently do off-duty work, because I see that all the time, you know, and if they want to pick up off-duty hours, if there's any way to do that, I mean, that was the idea behind it, not necessarily overtime or anything like that, but off-duty time.
Well, I understand that, and I think that the sheriff understands that that is an issue. However, you haven't been a pilot. You understand that you can't continue to work certain hours and then be ready to do your normal duties at times. And I'm sure that it's not reluctance on the sheriff's part to do what we've asked. It's whatever scheduling issues he's dealing with, he continues to have to work at. I will add, this was certainly your doing, and under no circumstances would I ever lay claim that this was my idea. So when participation trophies are given out, sir, you will have this one. And this is your baby, and I understand that. I was just tasked with doing this, and so I'm doing it as best I can.
Sure, Donna?
One of the things, and we discussed this before, we told them from the beginning, any of the officers for off duty. The problem is they only have, I think everybody knows, there's a real shortage of policemen. They're dropping out right and left. They're still shorthanded, but they already have commitments, churches, schools, all of those things. So to send someone out here right now, it is tough. But then they're
Is there-
trying to rehab.
There an enforcement situation with that too? Your ability to enforce or to arrest?
Yes, if it's not duty officer and it's something where they have to do an arrest, they're not allowed to do that. They have to call in someone for a regular shift.
Thank you. Any other questions on that? Anything else? Staff report? None?
I just have one quick thing, like for everybody to congratulate Sheila. Sheila's been with us since 2011. She got her certification in 2018. If you'll remember, she was city secretary of the year for all of North Texas. And she gets recertified, so she'll be here. for a while.
Next item is consent agenda. Any item on the consent agenda may be removed by any member of council for individual discussion or consideration. Council, anything to be removed from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as is.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda as stated.
Motion by the mayor pro tem, second by Councilmember Mayor. So all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous motion carries. Next item is discussion and consideration items or action items. And discussion and consideration of taking action adopting ordinance 22-002, reporting the town council February 8, 2021 approval of a change of zoning and master plan for 2.49 acres just east of 1045 Orchid Hill from RE5 to RE2. Any history on this?
It was passed by council in February. However, there wasn't a formal ordinance. So this is basically tonight, you're just adopting what you
Cleaning
approved
up
back.
what we've been. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
Make a motion to accept and adopt ordinance 22-002.
We have a motion by the mayor pro tem, do I have a second?
I'll second.
A second by deputy mayor pro tem, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous motion carries. Next item is discussion, consideration of taking action regarding speed limit sign on Orchid Hill and Chin Chapel Road and signs to read strictly enforced. Deputy Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, sir, before I get started, Council and Mayor, was this one of your projects as well?
Yes.
Excellent. So please make sure everybody knows that so that we understand where this came from. A lot of discussion has gone on both in town and here with the staff about the signs. There are currently a couple of proposals. One is to get new signs that say, and I think the package had a sample that says speed limit 30 miles per hour, and under it, it says strictly enforced. On Copper Canyon Road, we have separate signage that says speed limit strictly enforced. So that's another option we can look at. This particular signage issue is not a bank breaker. And so I certainly see where we should discuss and entertain everybody's opinions on the sign issue. There has been some negative response to the signs. A lot of people feel that added signage is going to contribute to a less sightly appearance when you already have a sign that says what the speed limit is, an additional sign saying basically, yes, we mean it, is maybe not necessary. For lack of anything else, since I'm opening the discussion, my opinion on that is that from my perspective, you have two types of speeders. You have the speeder that's distracted, and no matter what you put up, that speeder is going to speed because they're not paying attention as a motorist to what they're doing. So regardless of what you do in terms of signage, you're probably not going to notice. The next person that you might run into is the speeder that intentionally wants to speed because they're late or they don't care or whatever their reason is, but they're not going to follow the sign that everybody learned in driver's school means this is the law, this is the maximum speed. They're going to speed anyway. So I suspect that adding a sign that says speed limit strictly enforced along those lines is not going to help there. And just for look, we have 13 such signs along Copper Canyon Road. And in the last 6 months, 399 citations were handed out on that road for speed. So, and I brought this up just in discussion with people, and some people feel like, well, obviously it doesn't work. Other people's perspective are, well, imagine if those signs weren't there, 5,800 people. I don't know, and I'm not sure any of us really know without doing some extensive tests. I do think that if everybody wants those kind of signs, it's not, a financially prohibitive issue. And so I'm less concerned about that. Subsequent to that, Jeff Dahl, who, if you'll recall, made a statement at the last meeting concerning his concern along Orchid Hill and his desire to increase safety. What he's done is he's gone out and looked into those flashing signs that have a built-in radar. When you approach them, it tells you what your speed is. If you're over your speed, it either starts flashing or tells you to slow down. That's a much more complicated subject for several reasons. One, the cost. The signs in and of themselves start at $4,000, and that's just for the sign. So when you start thinking about at least 3 major thoroughfares, not including 407, to put signs in both directions, you're starting to get into some money. Then we would have to look into what's going to cost to install these signs. Some people that have seen these proposals very much object to seeing a sign that's constantly flashing at you. They think it would detract from the country feel of our town. The rural feel to our town. So I think if we go down that road, we really owe it to everybody in town to take our time, not just go spending money and doing things just because we think it's going to have an effect. I have reached out to Deputy Floyd to get an opinion on whether, because he's out there all the time. And so maybe he has some insight on whether such signs are effective, if they're not effective. Sir, do you know, can you shed some light into that? Let me put you on the spot.
Yes, last or several stories. So I was over the traffic unit for a while. I worked there for just that 30 years. And I can tell you that we used to have the speed trailers similar to the flashing signs. And people think it's a game. They want to see how fast they can get the speed trailer up to. And so I would park my motor jocks behind the speed trailer because you're going to get those guys and gals who step on the gas because they're playing the game with the speed trailer. To answer the big question of everybody's speed is a game. You can put all the signs you want to, all the flashing signs, speed trailer. The only thing that stops speeding is put an officer on the ground line ticket. And when people go by, that road, this road, that road, and you see a deputy out there with his ticket book out, trying to ticket, that's what slows people down. Very easy. All the signs.
Thanks, sir. The issue with the trailer, because we've all seen it, Allen Village has at least one that I know. I'm sure that's a much more costly route to go. Then you have the issue of where do we keep the trailer, who maintains it, and who drives it around town to put it places. So it gets much more complicated. If the town decides they want flashing signs, I suggest we look at a more permanent situation because we don't have people to drive trailers around and put in places and maintain it, et cetera. But again, that's a pretty, it's gonna be, $20,000-$30,000 to put 6 signs around town by the time you're said and done. And probably for every person that says they really like the idea, there's gonna be 1 or 2 or 3 that are gonna go, that's horrific. We don't want that in town because it ruins our atmosphere. So my suggestion is that with this signage issue, we take our time, we study the issues, we let the folks in town tell us what they want to see or don't want to see, instead of just going off and starting to buy things that you may not need, or more importantly, that may not be effective.
Thank you, Council.
If we look at the option of replacing the current speed limit signs with these that say strictly.
That's what's in your packet.
Oh, that's what I thought. I thought we were adding additional signs.
No.
No, that's for Orchid Hill and Chin Chapel, correct? To replace the ones on Copper Canyon Road stay because they already have signage that indicates that it's strictly registered.
So we're not net adding a bunch of signs necessarily.
No.
And it costs, it's right around the averages to put the signs, switch them out is $35 each, because you have 2 bolts, the top bolt's a regular bolt, the one at the bottom is tamper proof, so they all have to be cut off. So it's $35 a sign.
It's not a deal breaker.
What about just the little strictly enforced signs like we have on top of Canyon Road?
You
Is
can,
that the second quote?
you can put those up, but then you're into the poles, we have different kind of poles, you drill into those, install those signs, and they were not too far off the price of these.
What is a $491 quote? What is a $491 quote?
I think that's a different vendor. It's an alternative vendor, correct, Donna?
Yeah, Vulcan, they're the company that when the county put in Chin Chapel, they totally replaced Chin Chapel. It's a company they use. But what we're trying to do is make TxDOT standards and put in high intensity as we replace signs, which is what we're required to do. And so that's where you can have the 2 different lids.
So the whole purpose of this country is to allow people to understand that they're in a strictly enforced town. And we hear that all the time from people, oh my gosh, Copper Canyon is now a speed trap. We never had that reputation before, but now we do. And my point of doing the strictly enforced sign, that matches Copper Canyon Road. It lets people understand that there is no tolerance, because everybody understands when they drive around the state of Texas, there's the Texas 5. We all know when you go to Oklahoma, they have a reputation that you don't have 5 miles an hour of the speed limit, right? They're very strict up there. My only point is that's to prevent people from coming here and paying tickets. And I've watched people pay tickets here, and they're very upset because they get ticketed for a very slight amount over the speed limit. We don't want people speeding. And it's not about being able to control speeding, because people, as the council has said, are going to speed no matter what. Whatever sign you post, unless you post 90 miles an hour, and we're not doing that clearly. So my only point is, it's not a lot of money. It matches up the town, the rest of the town, and lets people understand where they're entering a strictly enforced zone. And we want people to be on the speed limit, not over.
And that's totally up to the council to make that decision. The thing I would take issue with is I pull those tickets every quarter, look at them, see where they are, who's writing them, everything else. And there's maybe out of all those tickets, there might be 1 or 2, they're 9 miles an hour. They're almost 100% on the 10.
Right, but the people are assuming they have that, almost have that pad anyways, but most of the time when they're driving around and stuff. So anyways,
So the options I see tonight here is we can either deny this, or we can approve this, or we can table this to a future meeting when we have more input from other council members, or we could even move it to postpone this till a work session in June.
My advice on this, given the conversation, by the way, I like the idea. Is to get some professional advice. We should ask the sheriff what their counsel is on this as well. Not that your counsel's diminished in any way, shape, or form. I just think we should talk to professionals, and I think we should do something. And I think the strictly enforced is a good measure. It may not be enough, but I think we should just do a measure that makes sense once and get it right. So I'm in support of the idea. I think we should talk about it at a workshop and get it done. We'll all be on the same page, I'm sure, with information.
Given the support for it,
Why do we do it? I say, I call the question, let's make a vote.
you know, it's.
Just a quick question.
Okay, we have a,
I've been watching this. Yeah, Mr. Page.
Mark Page, 12050 Orchid Hill, and I'm along with Jeff about slowing people down on Orchid Hill. There's some crazy people on Orchid Hill. My question is only is, does strictly enforced change the actual enforcement? I mean, in other words, as you say, the Texas 5, I mean, I confess, I have a Texas 5 myself, right? Most of us do. But does that mean that if I'm doing 35 and 30 zone, I'm now going to be ticketed for doing over 30? The question is, does it change enforcement or is it purely?
That's one of the questions that I actually have.
It changes nothing.
I don't think it changes legally anything, but I think it's an important question. Again, I just want to have advice from the sheriff's department on their experiences with these things, because we've been doing this for, I don't know, 100 years. So it'd be good to get some input on what professionals.
Councilmember Mayor, I don't see this going through tonight. Would you like to?
I'd like to make one more comment, one more request, Donna, if you could. So the signs we have out there now, the 30-mile-an-hour signs, are not high density, high reflectivity
They're
signs.
reflective, they're just not as good. They still are.
They meet,
okay.
they currently meet Texas standards for signs.
Yeah.
So there's no real reason to replace them. Is that correct?
On Copper Canyon Road.
On Copper Canyon Road and, well, no, I'm talking about Chin Chapel and Orchid Hill.
No, those are good.
Those are all good. They meet the standard.
Mhm.
So the only thing that I'm looking at, Ryan, my original idea was to match up with Copper Canyon Road, was to place a little 4x6, whatever the size is of the sign. I'm not sure. I didn't go and measure them. I was going to do that today and I didn't. But strictly enforced sign underneath there, you know, underneath that current sign, so we can save costs. You're easy, bolt it up on the signs. Every one of the posts have holes through the post to bolt those signs on. So in your next bid, when we come back to this again, then please, if you could have a bid for just a little strictly enforced signs, matching state standards on strictly enforced under the speed limit signs, not a whole big brand new sign. See that bid.
At $35 for the other side, I can imagine that's not going to be not anymore. So this isn't a money issue.
It's
This is
not, I agree with you.
dollar. This is not a dollar issue. We're spending more time on this. We did. Wheel. You know, it's not going to make or break the bank. It's not going to make a bit of difference. 4x6 sign going 40 miles, it's 50 miles an hour and a 40. They're not going to see it anymore. They're not paying attention to it. I think it's something we should either vote on tonight and approve it or deny it, or move it to a work session in June.
I call for a vote of the issue tonight.
So is that a motion?
That's a motion to vote on the issue tonight.
I have a motion by Councilmember Mayor. We'll have a second.
I'll second that.
I have a second by Councilmember, the Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Castillo. All in favor?
Aye.
Councilmember Mayor, Councilmember Castillo, in favor, against?
It's indifferent. It's not that big of a.
Thank you. 3 in favor, motion.
I just think we should get advice from the sheriff's department.
It was not that committee, it was his election committee.
It doesn't matter. It's not what we do.
It's not, this not a different. So, next item is a discussion item on, from Kevin O'Neill, a citizen, made a request to be able to come to council and speak in regards to limiting the fences in front yards and on certain size lots. Mr. O'Neill, O'Donnell, I'm sorry, O'Donnell. Would you please come up and state your name, address, and reason for your agenda item?
Kevin O'Donnell, 510 Oak Ridge Trail in the Woodlands. I'll be brief here. We moved here 4 years ago and we were handed an HOA that I think was intended to sort of be a governing regulatory thing for individual independent contractors for builders, because most of the homes are, it's not just one builder or anything. And they had little things in there like you could never fence the front yard, you couldn't have a front facing garage, just various little things that had to do with evidently what they wanted what the original landowners wanted the area to look like. So this really hasn't been an issue. I've worked here 4 years, and but recently some people moved into the neighborhood and redone homes, completely gutted them and fixed them up, which is great. But they could, for example, someone built in the front yard a 6-foot cattle fence. I mean, these are acre lots, and once you have acre lots by definition, you're in the neighborhood. I mean, an acre lot is not the King Ranch or Yellowstone, it's a neighborhood. And if we, and I don't know how many of you, I think probably none of you have less than 2 acres, I don't know, but as you drive around, perhaps, so this would impact you to some degree. As you drive around neighborhoods like Chinchilla North or the Woodlands, if everyone had a fence in their front yard, I think it might be a little detraction. My only driver here is land values, property values. That's my only motivation. There's nothing else, because I know for sure that everyone in this town does not share the same aesthetics. So that's not driven by aesthetics, it's just land value. And but if everyone, just to picture this, if you drove around any of these neighborhoods with acre lots, and everyone had a fence, even if they were all the same, which they wouldn't be, by the way, but everyone had a fence. I mean, this would look like a prison that just kept expanding. And I don't think people want to live in that neighborhood. So it is becoming a concern with the normal turnover of the neighborhood and people moving out and having, again, not common aesthetics. So I have a concern about it. I don't know if it's a shared concern. I don't know if it's something worth spending much time with, but if it strikes me as something that is, I understand a no-brainer. It's not a common no-brainer, but the property value issue, I think, is probably shared by people that live in contiguous lots, neighborhoods. And that's it. You and I discussed it very briefly there, and about 2 weeks ago, and you expressed concern, and I share it, and that's enforcement. Enforcement's always an obstacle or an issue with any sort of new ordinance or anything. I'm not sure that's a reason not to have the ordinance, but it's always a consideration. The other consideration here is, well, maybe we should have, specs, certain specs for the fence if it was in the front yard. My only concern about that is speccing your way into ambiguity. So, which also adds to the enforcement issues.
I think this is probably something we'll bring up in a work session soon and discuss. There is a maintenance issue that when we see some of these lots that are dilapidated, they're 15, 20-year-old with wood rail and they're 2x6 with wood posts and falling apart. I understand what you're saying. It does not look good for the neighborhood. So that becomes, if you have an ordinance that does allow it, then you have to enforce that ordinance and then you have to have an enforcement. So, my council suggestion is this is a work session item.
I agree. I totally appreciate the concern about property values. And I think everybody up here is staunchly in support of that notion to maintain property values as best they can, right? I do think we got to be really careful though. There's a range of control and perception of control that people in this building will have over homeowners and property owners, including HOAs and other things that a lot of people in this town despise. And I think when we talk about 1 acre or 2 acre prohibition without permissions, you've got neighborhoods like the estates of Copper Canyon that have, I know that neighborhood has fencing around their properties, and they probably would take exception of having control over that going forward. So I think we just need to be careful about this. I don't disagree with what you're saying. And by the way, there is nothing about bad taste that I think anybody up here takes, doesn't understand. There's plenty of that. And you have, neighbors that don't respect each other and do things that are in poor taste. That is not good. So I appreciate your position, and I think we should.
I don't think there's any,
workshop.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything sacred about whether it's, 1 acre or 2 acres. The real issue is once you get into a neighborhood environment. So you could, I'm not, wasn't married to any particular lot size. I just picked 2 acres or less as a kind of an arbitrary thing. Obviously, the smaller the lot size, the more you're in a neighborhood environment and the more it matters to the other neighbors and the overall value of property.
Understand. Thank you for sure.
We did receive 3 or 4 letters in opposition of this. But however, I think there is some merit to it. I think it would be something for discuss, at a later date, where we have a whole council.
Can I mention, I am the only one up here that doesn't live in more than 1 acre, so I have 1 acre lot. And for your own personal knowledge, we have ordinances already for maintenance on fences.
I read it.
Okay, good. So if you want to, and I want everybody to know, I'm sure Donna would take, because nobody likes talking about their neighbors, it's your neighbor. Yeah, say, you want to fix up their fence or whatever. She would take an anonymous report, and then it is the administrator's responsibility and our responsibility to ensure the fences are kept up properly, looking good, and keeping the values of the properties up in all of the neighborhoods and stuff. So, if there's a report, Don will let us take care of it, I'm sure. We'll work it out. We'll figure this, what we need to do to let that homeowner know that their fence needs to be repaired. In fact, I think we read an article that said, somebody said, hey, I know my fence is bad, I'm gonna fix it up. So that's a good thing that this issue's brought up. I agree that we need to talk about it further in a workshop or something like that, no question about it, because lots of people have changed out. I too, like you, moved here 40 years ago and got that same HOA handout. That people don't believe it's true, but it is true.
Yeah, and I'd be the last person in the room that would want an HOA. I'm
Right.
not recommending
And nobody wants to
In
establish
fact, even
that.
if we want to just make sure that the fences are permitted, I mean, that might be a good start. I don't know. I don't know how many people that have built front yard fences, for example, in this neighborhood or in Chapel North, that had permits or secured them. I don't think it was required.
Well, I did have to drive around the entire town today, and I looked at, and there's probably, I counted at least 35 homes in Woodlands and Chin Chapel North that have some type of fence in their front yard. Some are very nice, some are very cute.
Were 2 of them the same?
Pardon?
Were 2 of them the same?
No, not really. And that's okay. I mean, that's why we live out here. That's why I live here in Copper Canyon. But I do want to make one comment though, that I think is pretty funny. So I'm going to say it, is Jimmy Stewart on A Wonderful Life. When he had to go date the girl he was dating for A Wonderful Life, he had to go through a front fence off the street to get to her house and stuff. So my whole point is, you can't get much more.
We also had sewers.
You can't get much more, you can't get much more.
Sidewalks.
You can't get much more Americana than the front, a picket white fence in their front yard. So we do, but we do have, I want to make sure you understood that, everybody knows that, we do have ordinances for maintaining the fence, and we do have ability to enforce that. So,
Thank you. Anything else, council, on this? We'll move on to the, whenever we try putting together our joint meeting with P and Z and work session. We'll do that's today. Anything to be put on the next agenda? Hearing none, time being 7:40, got the motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by the Mayor Pro Tem, second. Second by the Deputy Mayor Pro Tem, all in favor.
all right.
Motion carries.